Good afternoon to all our listeners and all our viewers. On Friday, 25 November, we are going to write accounting paper 2. So let's see what we can expect from accounting paper 2 on Friday, 25 November. The structure of the accounting paper. The accounting paper consists of 150 marks for 2 hours. There could be 3 or 4 questions as we've seen in past papers. There's no specific order in terms of the question or topic, so we will basically discuss what to expect in this question or this paper. Topics allow for integration of different topics, like internal control could be asked in the different topics. Instructions, total marks and allocation can be found on page 2. Use the time that's given as a guide wisely. In paper 1 we had some complaints that people could not finish, but the paper wasn't that long that you could not finish, so you need to manage your time wisely. You cannot sit for 10 minutes on a 2-mark question. If it's only 2 marks, 2 max 3 minutes, then you move on. There are some appetizers in each question, example concepts, missing words or match the words to the phrase. These are little appetizers that you should know, concepts linked to the different topics. What to expect? We can expect VAT in the paper, 10 to 15 marks. Reconciliations, you have your bank reconciliations, your debtors reconciliation and your creditors reconciliation, plus your age analysis there, maybe 25 to 35 marks. We have manufacturing, plus minus 35 to 45 marks. Budgets, maybe 35 to 45 marks. Your inventory valuation, plus minus 45 marks. Then you have your ethics, your problem solving, your financial indicators. Also remember that your fixed assets or your depreciation calculations can also form part of paper 2, mostly the calculations. As you would see, the note for fixed assets will appear in paper 1, but depreciation calculations can appear in paper 2. Even your asset disposal account, your questions on your fixed asset register can all appear in paper 2. Internal control as well. When answering your questions, read the instructions carefully. Know your formats. This week, take time to go over your formats. I always say that format is your map in this accounting jungle. If you don't know your format, you don't know where you are going. And the minute you know a format, it becomes easier to find your information, right? So make sure that you study your format. Answer all questions. Do not leave any blank spaces. I cannot give you a mark if there's a blank space, but if you wrote something, I could maybe misinterpret your answer, but nothing means no mark. You're taking a chance away for getting 1 or 2 marks maybe. Maybe not, maybe you didn't give a good answer, but maybe you at least get 1 mark for that answer that you're giving. So do not leave any blank spaces. Remember, paper 2, your managerial accounting, a lot of theory, so you need to answer. Read your information and place your figures on the answer book. As you read opening balances with manufacturing, for example. Then you read opening balance for raw materials. Is this amount, and closing balance is that amount. Go and place it immediately on your answer sheet. What is stopping you? At least you're getting 2 marks. So as you read your information, go and put it in the right place. But once again, to be able to do that, you need to know your formats. Start with any question. You have your answer book, right? The answer book will tell you exactly what's expected. In the 10 minutes of reading time, I would say just go through your answer book. Check your answer book to see exactly what they're expecting from you on Friday. Once you've gone through your answer book, you then decide on a particular question that you would like to start. I like manufacturing. Manufacturing is, say, for example, question number 4. I will start with number 4. You like inventory. Inventory is, let's say, question number 2. You start with question number 2. So start with a question that you know best. Show your workings in brackets to earn part marks. Something that you like to do your calculations on the question paper somewhere in an open space that you find. And then eventually you transfer your final answer to the answer book. If the answer is incorrect, then you cannot earn part marks on it. At least if you show your calculations in brackets, you can earn part marks if your final answer is incorrect. You can also get a method mark for the final answer if some parts of the calculation is correct. So it's important to show your calculations in brackets. How do I apply my knowledge that I have? This whole year you've been in grade 12. The teachers taught you and they did a great job of teaching you. So how do we apply it? We start with VAT today, and we're starting in no particular order. And I'm not saying that VAT will be there or will not be there. Remember, we're anticipating what might be in the paper. You will even see the paper before I see the paper. Value added tax. Remember, it is now 15%. To calculate the VAT amount, VAT excluded, you take your amount times 15 over 100. VAT included, you take your amount times 15 over 115. If I see how they ask the questions now, it's a little table with some missing figures that you have, right? So you need to use these formulas to calculate the VAT amount. You need to calculate is the amount payable or receivable to SARS. Use the system that you are most comfortable with. In other words, use the way your teacher showed you in class how to calculate this amount. It is often best to use the ledger account, the VAT control account, to calculate the missing amount. That way you will not get confused when to add, when to subtract. Remember with your VAT control account, your VAT input is on your left hand side, my left hand side, and the VAT output is on my right hand side if you look at your paper in front of you. VAT input on the debit side and the credit side, because VAT input is an asset and we claim that back from SARS. VAT output is a liability and we have to pay that amount over to SARS. Also, look at your VAT exempt items and your zero rated items. Remember your zero rated items, things like your brown bread, your vegetables, the VAT rate on these goods is 0% and that can change at any time. We say that VAT is a fair system of taxation because everybody is expected to pay this 15% on VAT, right? Certain items like salaries and wages is VAT exempt because there's another form of tax on that, right? So learn those things that you can look out before the time. Always look for complex calculations involving errors in recording, right? Okay, so the difference between your input and your output, that is in the amount payable to SARS. If input is more than output, then SARS owes you. If output is more than input, then you owe SARS. Let's look at our reconciliations. Last year, bank reconciliations was out of the syllabus, so it was not in our 2021 paper. But this year, bank reconciliations has been put back into the syllabus. So, I said already in January, I think we could expect the bank reconciliation in our papers this year because it has been brought back into our syllabus. I might be wrong, I might be right, but let's look at it. Remember to use the information of the previous month's bank reconciliation to get the bank balance at the beginning. Errors in the books of the business must be corrected in the CRJ and CPJ. Errors on the bank statement must be corrected in the BRS. Now you learn these principles because somehow we find this BRS very, very difficult. In BRS should not be a difficult thing. Practice many examples of BRS so that you can get used to it, and if you do see it on Friday, that you can earn a lot of marks in the question. When you total the CRJ and CPJ, remember to add the provisional totals as well. To earn that method mark at the end, they normally say to you that the provisional totals must be added as well. If it's not added in, then you lose that method mark. So take note of that. Because the provisional totals are normally printed on the answer book, it's easy for you to forget about it. Don't forget about it. The totals of the bank reconciliation must always be the same. Total on the debit and total on the credit side. The missing figure is normally the balance of the bank statement. Remember, we do not have checks anymore. We only talk EFT. We don't have checks, only EFT. So you must not talk anything about checks. Age analysis. Problems revealed by the age analysis. Normally I say you look for two things, credit terms and credit limit. But credit terms also goes with slow payers, people who don't stick to the credit terms, people who take long to pay, right? What is the credit term? It's the number of days that you are allowed to repay your credit. Normally they say 30 days or 60 days. Then you expect your debtors to be within those 30 days or within the 60 days, right? What to do if debtors don't stick to their credit terms? We charge the debtor interest and we provide them incentives for early payments. So if they pay us in time, we give them a discount 5% or 2% depending on the company's terms. Then you look at the credit limit. So credit terms, credit limit, those are the two main problems that you look first for when you do your age analysis, right? Your credit limit, that is the maximum amount that a debtor is allowed, or the credit that the business gives their debtor. So as a person, Andrews will get 10,000 Rand, then I must stick within that 10,000 Rand. If my outstanding balance is then 12,000, it means I've exceeded my credit limit with 2,000, right? Also, when you answer, you name the debtor, Andrews, like I said, you name the problem, credit limit or credit terms, and you state the amount. I'm 2,000 Rand over my credit limit. Or I'm not sticking to the credit terms. There's an amount of, let's say, 7,000 Rand that's outstanding for 60 days or 90 days. So be very specific when you answer. What to do if they don't stick to their credit limit? Do not allow them to buy again, right? They must stay within the limit. If they want to buy again and they did not pay us, we expect a payment before they're allowed to pay. Okay, use a computerized till slip to detect this at the point of sale. In other words, most of our businesses have computerized systems now. So if I as a person come and I want to buy on my account on credit at Edgar's Truett's, one of our stores that we have, they will not allow me to buy if the system says that I've already exceeded my credit limit, right? Then they will either expect me to pay a certain amount to be within the limit, or they will just say, no, sorry, we cannot allow you, right? That would be managing our debtors well. Sometimes they can also ask, what will you do to ensure that you don't end up with bad debts or debtors who cannot pay you? Then you should say you should do proper screening. How do we screen the debtors? We look at their pay slips, we look at their credit history to determine their credit worthiness, right? That we do before the time to prevent bad debts, right? Also possible part of this, your creditors and your debtors reconciliations. Just remember, they will not ask you all three in one paper. It will either be bank and creditors or bank and debtors or bank and VAT, but they will not ask all of it. But it is our duty to go over everything, right? With your creditors and your debtors, identify your errors and omissions. Correct the error in the control account or the list or the reconciliation. Look for amounts posted on the wrong side of an account and double the figure to make the correction, right? If they say to you it was a debit entry and it was supposed to be a credit entry, you first rectify the mistake, then you record the actual entry, and that's where that doubling of the amount comes in, right? Be careful with that one. Find the difference when an entry is incorrect. If they give you two amounts, you find the difference, right? And that difference must then be recorded, either added or subtracted, depending on what you find. Rectify, if it's only the account, you only rectify in the account. If it's the list, you only rectify in the list. So your main job here is to determine whether it affects your account, your debtors control account, your debtors ledger, your list, or where is the mistake. Or with your creditors, is it your creditors ledger, is it on the statement from outside, where did the mistake occur, and then you go and rectify. Okay, let's look at manufacturing. Once again, memorize the format of the production cost statement. The production cost statement is mostly made up of method marks. So if you can do the raw material cost, the direct labor, and you bring it from your notes onto your production cost statement, right or wrong, then you will have 2 marks already, right? So make sure that you know the formats of your production cost statement, know how to do your raw material cost, direct labor cost, your factory overhead cost, right? It says you must always start with direct material plus direct labor, and the 2 will give you prime cost. Add factory overhead cost to prime cost to get cost of production. Remember, with your factory overhead cost, only factory cost must be taken into account here. Remember, things like bad debts, things like telephone. Telephone is normally your administrative cost, right? Bad debts part of selling and distribution. Your advertising, right? Part of selling and distribution. If you put these costs in your factory overhead, they normally subtract 1 mark because they see it as foreign items. So be wary of that one. Add work in progress in the beginning of the year and minus work in progress at the end of the year to get total cost of production of finished goods. I always say work in progress at the beginning, work in progress at the end, and total cost of production. The 3 of them goes together. So if you are given work in progress at the beginning, work in progress at the end, then you have to work your way down to total cost of production. If one of work in progress at the beginning of work in progress at the end is missing, then you were given total cost of production and you have to work your way from the bottom up to be able to calculate one of work in progress at the beginning or work in progress at the end. So be careful with that. Lately, I've also seen the bridge income statement appearing more and more in our papers. I saw it in the November 2021 paper, and I saw it in the May-June 2022 paper. So make sure that you know the format of this bridge income statement so that you can be able to do it. Manufacturing, when you calculate your break-even point, the formula is total fixed costs over selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. What is the break-even point? A break-even point is a point where we're not making a profit or a loss. We're covering all our fixed costs in the business, right? And all the units more than the break-even point, that is when we start making a profit. If we produce less than the break-even point, then we are making a loss. Remember, the answer must always be in units. Sometimes the examiner will go as far as to say, if your answer is in rands and you put the R sign in front of it, then you don't get the mark. So make sure that your answer is always in units. Compare the break-even point with the number of units produced for this particular year. That must always be your starting point, right? Then you can go further and look at the break-even point, break-even to break-even, or break-even with production from the previous year, right? But your first point of departure, always break-even point to the number of units produced. Remember, more than the break-even, profit. And you state you are making a profit on 5,000 units, or you're making a loss because you're producing 1,000 units less than the break-even point. You have to comment on the break-even point, whether you are satisfied or not. Obviously, your goal is to produce as many more units than the break-even point, right? You want to make more, double the break-even point. But anything more than the break-even point, you're happy with that, right? But your idea is not to make less than the break-even point, because if you're making less than the break-even point, obviously then you're not making a profit. So then you are not satisfied. Analyzing unit cost. Lately, they're asking you to look at the unit cost where there's a problem. If the material cost increased from last year, possible comments: you can get a cheaper supplier, buy in bulk, save on transport costs, negotiate discounts, work more effectively. If you look at your direct labor and it increased, then you will say you try to control overtime, less overtime, better supervision of workers in the workplace. Go through these type of answers so that when you are sitting there on Friday, you can at least go back to them and have these type of answer. Because I know sometimes we struggle to come up with answers on the spot, right? Let's move on to budgets. Budget. Ooh, another topic that I love budgets, but I know you don't love budget. Right? Understand the difference between cash and non-cash items, or items not appearing in the budget, such as depreciation, discount, and credit transactions, right? Because they can ask you which items should not be in the budget, right? Know the items that would not appear in a projected income statement but on the budget, or the other way around. Commonly asked calculations. Debtors collection period. I've looked at the November 2021, the June 2022, and our Free State prelim paper. They all start with the debtors collection period. So look at the debtors collection period. Make sure that you can do it, right? Ask your teacher to just explain it again to you. Also look at the creditors repayment period. Percentage increases and decreases, loan amounts or interest. Commonly asked interpretations, budgeted figures against actual amounts. We'll talk a little bit about that. If they give you budgeted figures, right, and they say compare it with your actual amounts. Just go there. If they talk about advertising and they say compare it, then you look at sales to see if advertising was good or not, right? If they talk about security, look at stolen items in the business. If they talk about wastage of workers, look at training in the business. Did we spend? Because if your budgeted figure says 5,000, let's say for training of workers, but we only spend 1,000, but there's a lot of wastage in the business, then we should rather spend that money on training our workers than trying to save money, but then we lose money on the materials that could be costly. Or we should have appointed another security guard in the business, right? We're selling cell phones, iPhones, or something that's expensive. Samsung is also expensive nowadays. We selling Samsung or iPhones in the business. We should have appointed another security guard. We didn't do it. We're saving, let's say 100,000. Yet 20 cell phones went missing. So was it worth it to save the 100,000, yet we've lost 20 cell phones that could have cost us maybe 200,000? No. So you must compare it like that, right? Also, the calculations in the budget. The calculations repeat itself. The rent increase in the rent. Calculate the difference between what it was and what it is now, and put that difference over what it was before. And then you get times 100 and you get your percentage, right? The loan calculation, the fixed deposit calculation. They want to know what was the amount that was repaid or what was the amount that was invested. Write it the way you would normally write it. Your amount times your percentage over 100 times 1 over 12, then you turn everything upside down and you will get the answer that you are looking for. In the cash budget, sometimes it feels to you like you are not getting all the information. Remember, divide by what you have times what you want. Always look at what you are given. I assure you, there is definitely enough information in that paper on budgets for you to be able to get all the answers, right? So read your questions carefully. If they say to you, cash sales is 60%, total percentage is 100, where is the other 40? It will then be credit sales. So make sure that you read carefully and ask yourself the whole time in the cash budget, what do I have here? So what you have divided times what you want. Okay. Work through past papers. Like I said, calculations are very, very similar. Popular ones, increase in rent. Calculate the difference and put over what it was before. Salaries, the percentage increase. The portion of the loan that was repaid. Like I said, write it the way you normally know the calculation and then you turn everything upside down. Comment, make sure that you compare your budgeted with your actual figures. This cash budget is not that difficult. And work through many, many question papers, right? Ethics in internal control, integrated across all topics. Problem solving scenarios. Identify and provide solutions. Quote evidence or figures and take appropriate actions. I just want to also talk quickly before I go to errors and omissions about the problem solving scenarios. We also have stock valuations, right? FIFO, weighted average, and your specific identification. Now, if I look at my paper 1, we had weighted average. So I would say where my money is for next week Friday or this Friday's paper. FIFO, work from the bottom up. Weighted average, know your formula, right? Know the formula of how to do the calculation. And previously, this weighted average calculation was 9 marks. But in the June 2022 paper, it was only 4 marks for the calculation. So be aware of that some of the questions that we used to carry a lot of marks can carry less marks than it was previously asked, right? And your stock valuation, calculate the value, calculate your closing stock, right? Calculate the gross profit, right? Stock holding period, stock turnover rate. Make sure that you know all those calculations, right? FIFO, bottom up. Weighted average, I said know your formula. Specific identification, practice some calculations. Opening plus purchases minus your returns minus sales. Specific identification is not a difficult calculation, but because we don't practice it before the time, we take it for granted it's easy so we can do it. Yet on the day like Friday, then you don't even know how to do it and you lose the marks that should go for specific identification. Alright, so make sure you know it. Know your cost of sales calculation. Your opening stock plus your purchases minus your returns plus your carriage minus your closing stock. Missing stock, the same calculation. Your opening stock plus your purchases minus your returns minus your sales minus your stock on hand gives you your missing stock. Okay? To calculate your markup, you need your gross profit over your cost of sales. Gross profit equals to sales minus cost of sales. Know your stock holding ratio and your stock turnover ratio. Stock holding is the number of days that we have stock on hand in the business. When you want to comment on stock holding, you look at the product that you have. For example, if we have tomatoes, we're selling fresh fruit and vegetables. it will not be a good idea to have tomatoes or fresh fruit and vegetables for 180 days. Then our stock holding period is way too long, right? So look at the product that you have so that you comment on whether the stock holding period is good or not. And also compare it to what it was the previous year. The formula for the calculation is average stock over cost of sales times 365. The stock turnover rate is the number of times in a year that we sell out our stock. And we want the stock turnover rate to be high because it means we're selling out stock and we're making a lot of product. We can also say the number of times a year that we're replacing our stock in the business. Okay, comments, turnover rate, the more times the better. The number of times that we need to replace the stock. I wanted to talk about this problem solving scenarios. Normally with stock comes the problem solving question. You'll be given 3 businesses and these 3 businesses will have problems. You look at your information. Now before you look at your information, you read it, you're already starting to think that I'm looking for specific problems. I'm looking for high returns, I'm looking for stolen items, I'm looking for stolen cash. Maybe in your business, I'm looking for advertising that's too low, sales too low in comparison with workers, rent that's too high. I'm looking for returns that's too high in the business. So you already come with some problems in your head. So when you read your information on the 3 businesses, if there's such a scenario, but I've seen it in most of our papers, that there's a scenario with 3 businesses and then these businesses will have different and each one will have a different problem. For example, you will not find stolen cash in all 3 businesses. One will have the problem of stolen cash, one might have a problem of missing items, another one might have a problem of advertising that's too high or returns that's too high in the business, right? Rent that's too high, too much of stock on hand or stock or too few days of stock on hand. Now, what is the problem with having too few days of stock on hand? If you go to a business time and time again and you want to buy something, but whenever you get there, they don't have the item. They tell you they're going to order it. Are you going to go back to that business again? No, you don't want to go back to that business again because they forever don't have the stock that you are looking for, right? So a business needs to ensure that they do have enough stock on hand. Okay, stolen stock is obviously a big loss for the business. Know the difference between your perpetual and your periodic stock system. Perpetual is where we started in grade 10, where we had your sales and your cost of sales calculation, right? Then in grade 11, we introduced your periodic inventory system, where now the cost of sales is calculated at the end of the accounting period normally, right? By means of that long cost of sales calculation. Remember, when you're doing stock valuation, that long stock cost of sales calculation, I always say I must wake you up at 12 o'clock at night, then you must remember that and be able to recite that calculation for me. Because when you're doing your stock valuation, that calculation counts a lot of marks, and you can even see your weighted average and your specific identification is based on those calculations, right? So make sure that you know your cost of sales calculation. But the main difference between your perpetual and your periodic inventory system is in the calculation of your cost of sales. Where perpetual, the cost of sales is calculated after each and every sales transaction, and the periodic cost of sales is only calculated at the end of the accounting period by means of that long calculation. Okay, then identify and provide solutions. You might be asked to give solutions to the problems. Also, when you're answering, quote evidence or figures. Don't just say yes, no, this is wrong, that is wrong. Also give appropriate action. And in answering, try and match your action to your solution, right? If you say there's a problem here, then the solution must match the problem. Sometimes they are lenient and they say they don't, the problem and the solution don't have to match. Other times the examiners will say they want the solution and the problem and the solution to match. But my advice at all times, make it easy for the marker to give you those marks, right? And once again, these problem solving scenarios, I know we find it a bit difficult. That's why I say go with all these problems already in your head and you say this one must have this one or this one must have such a problem, so that you don't struggle to answer on Friday, because we tend to shy away. Even as teachers, we say calculations, we love calculations, let's calculate, leave out these questions. But then and by doing that, we don't give you enough practice on these type of questions, right? So don't do it on Friday. Friday you attempt every single question. Right or wrong, do your best. Okay, so as I say, take appropriate action. Your problem must match your solution. Errors and omission. Candidates forget to show workings. Sometimes, like I said earlier, you do the calculation somewhere else and then you don't show it in your book, on your answer book. Then you lose the marks. That's why I would always advise you, as you answer, you read your manufacturing. Information A is normally your opening and closing balances, right? As you read it, you go and place it on your answer book, right? B could be your what happened during the year, right? Your purchases. Go and put it where it belongs, right? Also, if you can use a dark colored pencil, then if you find you've placed something in a wrong place, you can at least erase it later on, right? So make sure that you show all calculations. Leave nothing out. Make sure that every mark that belongs to you comes your way. We say the distribution of our paper is 30% easy, 40% moderate, and 30% high order question. That 30% easy is easy enough for everybody to get. Make sure that you at least get those 30%, right? But we're not just going for 30%, we're going for 50, 60%, right? Remember, we're going for good marks. Comments are sometimes inappropriate and not relevant. I say to you, attempt every question, answer everything, but surely I cannot give a mark if the comment is totally inappropriate or not relevant. For example, your favorite one, the employee stole some cash. What to do? What is your first answer that you always want to say? Fire the person. It is not that easy with the labor laws in our country to just fire a person. So don't just say fire a person. Sometimes I would even say on the marking guide, the marker may not accept just firing a person. There's a lot of things. You want this person to repay the cash maybe. You want him to move him to another department so that he doesn't have to work with cash. So don't just say fire the person. So make sure that your comments are relevant. Read the scenario once or twice. And then you decide what is your problem and how you're going to deal with it. And my advice for you, go be relevant, right? Go outside and think, what are businesses doing to ensure that stock is not stolen? If you look at businesses like your shops in the malls, what do? They have those turnstiles. Those are relevant and realistic answers to ensure that stock is not stolen. My personal favorite, they say to you, there's a problem with stolen items. They've already installed cameras. And then they ask, what else would you do? What is the first thing that you say? Install cameras. But they already told you there's cameras. Then the marking guide will say, do not accept cameras because you were told that there's cameras. So please read carefully and don't say cameras if there's no cameras that needs to be installed. It's already installed, so you can't put more cameras on top of the ones that we have. So be relevant and appropriate in your comments. Read your story, try and take it out, but do not rewrite the story as is. Okay. Sometimes you neglect to attempt problem-solving questions. We talked about that, right? Foreign items results in marks lost. I talked about the formats. And I said to you, you need to study your formats, right? If I need the production cost statement, I know the format of my production cost statement. I know the format of my abridged income statement, right? Your BRS, you know your CPR, you know what goes to CPJ, you know what goes to CRJ, right? You know your ledger account, you know your BRS. You know age analysis, I'm looking for credit limits, I'm looking for credit terms, right? So make sure that you know. The budgets, we said these are the ways that you can do the calculations. Make sure that you know that and that you are well prepared. Often people say accounting we don't need to study. That's not true. There's a lot of things that we have to study, that we can study. Yes, during the year we do a lot of practicing and that's where our hard work comes in. But this is the time that you sit down and you study your concepts. You study your formats, right? And your formulas, especially your financial indicators. Make sure that you study your financial indicators and that you know which financial indicators are relevant for paper 2. Your financial indicators that you need to look at for paper 2. Gross profit on cost of sales. Now we are given a formula sheet in the exam. But that formula sheet does not have the names. So if you don't know your formulas, it is going to be very difficult for you to find the correct formula to use. The gross profit on cost of sales, it's easy because it says you need gross profit on sales, right? Operating expenses on sales. Operating profit on sales. These are all formulas that's linked that we need, right? Net profit on sales. Break-even point. Average debtors collection. Stock turnover rate. Average creditors. Stock holding period. Make sure that you know these formulas, that you do not struggle when they give you calculations on the financial indicators, right? Poor time management. Like I said, with paper 1, you complained that you could not finish the paper, right? Paper 2 will also be a lot of reading. But be careful. I like to, when I'm in my class, put a timer for 2 minutes. Now, you can't really put a timer because your timer will disrupt everybody. But I like to put a timer, and then when my time is up for 2 minutes, then I expect you to be done with the calculation. And often I find that you are then not done with the calculation because it takes you long to figure out what it is that you need and what you have to do. Now, that's what you do in class. But when you're in the exam room, you can't take that long to figure out what you need. So I would advise you at home in this coming week that you also put a timer for yourself and try and read faster and also try and do your calculation faster. If your teachers are with you in the extra classes, ask them, teachers, set the timer for them. Normally the kids love it when I put a timer and it goes off, and then 1 or 2 of them would be done with the calculation. And I would be strict and I would say, no, if it's 2 minutes, then we only take 2 minutes to get you into the habit of better time management. So for Friday, if it's 2 marks, read, move on to the next calculation. If you sit for 10 minutes with a 2-mark calculation, then believe me, you in any case don't know where you're going. Because if you knew where you were going, it wouldn't take you 10 minutes to do a 2-mark calculation. So you're wasting time for a calculation where you could have gotten the marks, but now because you're struggling with this one where it's only worth 2 marks, you're losing out on another question where you could have answered maybe better. That's why I also said to you, start with the questions that you know well, so that you don't waste time on those questions, because you know what, you understand it, so you move faster than the time that you are given. So make sure that you manage your time well. Look at the time allocation on page 2 and then say to yourself, I have so many minutes, I'm going to start with this one, I only have 30 minutes. And if you only have 30 minutes, try and save time so that you can use maybe 5 minutes extra on a question that you don't know that well. In the last 5 or 10 minutes, you shouldn't start with the question, because then you are not going to finish that question and you'll end up not. And oftentimes, it's the last question that's not answered well, and that might not even be the most difficult question in the paper. So you need to really work hard in this week so that you can manage your time better. Read faster. Put a timer on at home so that you can practice your own time management, right? So that we don't sit with the same problem. Because remember, paper 2 will be a lot of reading. It will require you to understand a lot more. There will be a lot more words to give you an indication of what you are supposed to do, right? Okay. And the same with the time management come with the fact that you are unable to do basic calculations. If you know how to do your basic calculations, then you should not waste a lot of time, right? Like I said to you, debtors collection, it's in every single paper. You make sure that you know how to do it, right? In the debtors collection, it's not that we struggle with the percentage calculations. Sometimes we don't know where to put the information, right? In the debtors collection is also not a lot of marks, so make sure that you get those marks, that when you get to it, you know how to do it, right? The cash budget has missing figures for you, right? Make sure that when you do get to the rent, you know. Calculate the difference between the two, put the difference over what it was before. You have that information with you in the exam. How long should it then take you to do that calculation? You find the two amounts, it's right next to one another. You calculate the difference, put it over what it was, times 100. There you have your answer, right? So basic calculations, you should be able to do it, right? Use your answer book wisely. Sometimes we write a lot of things. It says 4 marks, but we write outside the block that's even given to us. Be careful that you write only the basic points that's needed to answer that question, right? And also practice that. I know especially our Afrikaans students, you write all over the place. Some would even go on the other side and write all over wherever they can find a place. Then sometimes you might even lose a mark. We try our best to read all that information. But in writing so much, you can run the risk of one, running out of time, or that the marker loses track and not see when you eventually get to your point. So try and keep your answers brief. If it's 2 marks, at least 1 full sentence, and that's also important. You must write the full sentence. The days when division of duties on its own was enough is not enough anymore. You need to write the full sentence. If they say to you, pardon, Johnny deposits the cash, Johnny collects the cash, and Johnny takes the money to the bank. What is the problem there? Division of duty. But what is the problem really? Division of duty. Johnny is collecting the cash, Johnny is depositing the cash, and Johnny is pardon. Pardon. I beg your pardon. John. My apologies. Johnny is collecting the cash. So you state exactly what is the problem. Division of duties on its own will not give you 2 marks. Maybe 1 mark as a very basic answer, right? Sometimes you do not apply critical thinking skills to provide solutions to scenarios. Okay. You are given the problem. Like I said earlier, try and be realistic in your answering of the questions, right? Think of what's happening in the real world and what is a solution for that. Because oftentimes examiners will take your real life scenario or your real life answers into account. Okay, and make sure that you do your best in this exam on Friday. If paper 1 did not go so well for you, make sure that you make up in paper 2. The countdown. Work through as many examination papers as you can. As you work through these papers, you will see a pattern. For today, to prepare for today, I looked at November 2021. I looked at June 2022. I looked at our September prelim paper. Go work through those papers again to see exactly what will be expected from you and how the examiners are asking the questions, right? I've realized words like processing. Last week in paper 1, we had a word like processing. That could maybe even appear in paper 2 because we're dealing with EFTs, right? And they said something like the EFT was processed. Now, processing in the business world is not a difficult question because banks always say they've processed the payment. But for our learners, for you as our learners, maybe you are not familiar with processing, and that word processing really threw you off last week. So make sure that you are familiar with things like processing. What does processing mean? The money has already been paid over to the next party, right? Your EFTs. Why do people do the EFTs? It saves them time. It's convenient, right? So make sure that you are familiar with what's really happening, right? Work through as many examination papers as you can. We've given you the spring-winter materials, right? Or the spring materials. The spring materials deals with paper 2 content. Work through it. Work over and over through it until you know how to do it. Attend all extra classes. Now is not the time to relax. Now is the time to pick up and run. Form study groups to help each other. I always say, if you help others, you're also helping yourself. Because by explaining to others, you will also make sure that you understand better what is happening in your subject, right? And I know by now we're more than ready and we can't wait anymore to write this paper on Friday. I always say 100% no makanjani. So that means 100% no matter what, right? No matter what obstacles come our way. We say there will be obstacles, there will be doubters, there will be mistakes, but with hard work, there are no limits. So good luck for Friday. Make sure that you don't go into that exam room, that's our war room, without your formats. Make sure that you work through papers and make sure that you are as ready as possible. And once again, if paper 1 did not go your way, it's not too late. Make sure that you paper 2, you make up for what you missed out in paper 1. Thank you. Now, MTN is hosting a competition. The prize is a bucket hat and a t-shirt. You can go to the Free State Department of Education Facebook page to answer. The question that we have: what is the formula to calculate the break-even point? I repeat, what is the formula to calculate the break-even point? To answer, go to Free State Department of Education Facebook page. page. Thank you. I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.